Hello class, so today we're going to be beginning to read the novel The Great Gatsby. I am your teacher, Hadel Abdelkareem. You can call me Miss Kareem if you'd like. So for The Great Gatsby, as we can see in our novel, we have our characters who are introduced. We have our narrator, Nick Carraway, our main character, who is Jay Gatsby, Tom Buchanan, Daisy Buchanan, Jordan Baker, Meyer Wolfsheim, and George Wilson, and Meryl Wilson. So these are our characters that are introduced in the novel. So a little background on our author, who is F. Scott Fitzgerald. He was inspired to write this book by grand parties he attended on Long Island, where he witnessed rich people in the 1920s and their lifestyle. The novel is set in a fictional town in West Egg on Long Island in the 1920s. There is a division of classes, and people live in East Egg don't like the people in West Egg, as will be introduced. East Egg people have old money, and West Egg people have new money. They're both are rich, so rich people don't like people who are more rich than them. We are introduced to our narrator, Nick, as I mentioned, and he talks about the summer he spent in 1922 and all of the people he met, including Gatsby, who is our main character. There are a couple of terms that are mentioned that may be complicated, so I have some definitions. We have bootlegger, so who is someone who distributes alcohol illegally. Incarnation is an idea or concept made in some form. Intricate is a very detailed and complicated. Jauntiness, carefree, casual, stylish person. Pageant is emotionally moving or touching person. Reverie is a vivid, dreamlike state. Strident is forceful and pleasant. And then transitory is impairment. If there are other terms, I will explain them as well as we move along. Now, as we have finally read chapter 1, our narrator, Nick, is introduced. He has graduated from Yale. He has fought in World War II, and then he decides to become a bond trader, and he moves to New York City. And now there he rents a house in West Egg, which is where the new money comes from, where new people or people with new money live. And it is a small house that he rents. There is considered less where the rich people and new money live. As I mentioned, people in East Egg have the old money, and Nick ends up in chapter 1 having dinner with his cousin. She's like his third cousin, Daisy, with her husband Tom, who apparently also has gone to college with Nick at the time. And now, as you see in the image, we have West Egg versus East Egg, and then the West Egg, as you can see, is where Gatsby lives, and in East Egg is where Tom and Daisy live. And as you can see in the image, there is a green light at the end of the East Egg side of the mansion. So pay attention to that, because that is very important. Now, there are some questions. We have thoughts about Tom's character and how is he described. What does Nick find out about him? There are 2 things he finds out about him. Your thoughts about Daisy. Describe her. We're introduced to her character, Jordan Baker. What are you guys' thoughts about her? Daisy mentioned something. I want you guys to pay attention to this. She mentions and tells Nick, "I'm glad it's a girl about her daughter, and I hope she's a fool. The best thing a girl can be in this world is a beautiful little fool." Now, what do you think she meant by this? Now, so far, and keep this in mind, because maybe your answer will change later on of what she meant by this as we read the novel. And especially think about the time period that this is taking place into. And then Nick returns home. He sees somebody. Who does he see for the first time? So Tom and Nick in chapter 2, as we read chapter 2, Tom and Nick take a train to stop by the Valley of Ashes. Now, the Valley of Ashes is a place where basically the lower class people live. It is not like East Egg or West Egg, and it's not like the city. So Tom stops by George Wilson's shop. It's like a car shop, and he talks to him about selling his car. Nick notices something, and he says, "The eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg are blue and gigantic. Their retains are 1 yard high." Pay attention to this, because just the eyes, Dr. Eckelberg's eyes, we will kind of have hints and things to talk about later on. Now they go to the apartment in the city, and they get drunk. Now, part of the questions, there's a reason Tom went to Wilson's shop, and that is because he has his mistress, which is Mr. Wilson's wife. So they go to the city, and of course, Nick is kind of, as we see his reaction, he's kind of shocked about this. So there's a person who is mentioned, and is mentioned by Myrtle, and what does Tom end up doing? He does something very important, and it kind of shocks everybody. And then Nick, eventually he decides to leave. Why does he decide to leave? We'll obviously answer and discuss that. Now, in 2 different places, there is an article. Now, it talks about the Valley of Ashes, and is the Fresh Green Breast by Emil L. Now, in this article, they mention the Valley of Ashes. Now, in the novel, we see that there are like 2 different worlds. We have the city, we have the Valley of Ashes. Now, in the article, it says, central in the novel's spatial dynamics is the juxtaposition between New York City, a site of pleasure and engine of growth, and the protagonist suburbs homes in Long Island. So it's differentiating the 2 places, considering the city a place of opportunities, a place of growth for people. So we see the difference between there. Now, as we continue and we have read chapter 3, Gatsby is a person who always has a lot of parties, and so Nick ends up getting invited, but he gets invited not by Gatsby himself, because we haven't seen Gatsby yet or met him, only the glimpse that Nick has seen from him. He gets invited by Gatsby's chauffeur. So Nick decides to go. At the party, there are 2 girls and Jordan. They discuss how Gatsby, they heard a rumor that he once killed a man, of how he got his money. Nick wanders into the library, and he meets a man with owl eyes. And so he speculates who is in awe that these books are real. That is the man with the owl-eyed. Now Nick talks to a guy who they both had ended up serving in the war. Now Nick doesn't know this, but who is he talking to? He's talking to Gatsby. And he doesn't know this because he only saw a shadow of him. But he's talking to Gatsby, and he's kind of shocked and amazed that this is Gatsby, this is the guy. And we have the butler tells Miss Baker, Jordan Bake, that Gatsby wants to speak to her. So we're kind of wondering, like, what does Gatsby want with Jordan Baker? Any thoughts about what their conversation is about? And what they're talking about, whose name is revealed, as they're talking, because we will later see. Now in chapter 4, as we have read chapter 4, Nick starts talking about all of the people that he went to Gatsby's houses in the summer of 1922. Nothing much is going on here. Gatsby picks up Nick and takes him to lunch. They talk about money, education, going to war, and what it's like. And Gatsby introduces Nick to Mr. Wolsheim. So how do you guys think this character Walter Wolsheim is? You can describe him a little bit. As Gatsby leaves, Mr. Wolsheim starts talking to about Gatsby. So Gatsby leaves, and Mr. Wolsheim talks to Gatsby. And then later, Gatsby disappears all of a sudden, and Nick is just there. Because he meets somebody. Who does he meet? He meets Tom. Jordan calls Nick and tells him about Gatsby and Daisy and how they know each other. So we know that the person mentioned in Jordan and Gatsby's conversation was Daisy. But how do they know each other? So we mentioned what Gatsby tells Nick how he got his money. Gatsby apparently went to Oxford. This is another note you need to pay attention to. He went to Oxford. And we also find out that in chapter 1, if you guys recall, that Daisy was shocked when she heard the name Gatsby. So now we know that Daisy was surprised she was shocked about the name because she knows Gatsby. And so Gatsby asked Jordan to do something. So he basically asked her to meet up with Daisy. And so in chapter 5, as we have read chapter 5, Nick goes home and sees Gatsby across the lawn, and they start talking. Nick talks to Daisy and tells her to come over. And Gatsby and Daisy finally meet, and Daisy's glad to see Gatsby. How is Gatsby's reaction? You can describe him. Is he, happy, nervous? As we saw, he was very nervous to meet her. Gatsby takes Daisy to his house to give her a tour, and Mr. Clip Springs plays the piano for them. Okay, so now in the article, there are two different articles, and it talks about Gatsby's the star of the show. Now, in the first article, Fitzgerald, Gatsby and the Last Tycoon, The American Dream, by Marsh Joss. He talks about Gatsby wanting to be the star of the show and wants to show off to people. We see this in the novel as Gatsby takes Daisy to give her a tour of his house and how he kind of was showing off to her. And then another article, in Kinship and Friendship and Hardship, a comparative analysis of the Amelia So Falls, The River Net, and John Francis Scott Fitzgerald, The Great Gatsby, by Ding Mamadou. I hope I said that right. Talks about the character Baker and Gatsby are similar in their article, as these characters are popular people developing good relationships. It says The Great Gatsby is a phase of good time with active and good human relationships. Do you guys think this is accurate, or do you think this is part of what we've seen so far in The Great Gatsby? Because we hear of the Roaring 20s. It's a great time. Gatsby is very nervous, as we have talked about, and then he does something at the end of the chapter. He gives Daisy a tour of his house, bragging, as we talked about. Now, as we read chapter 6, there are rumors still spreading about Gatsby's life. There's a reporter who stopped by his house to talk to him and ask him questions. We eventually learn about Gatsby's past in this chapter and how he became wealthy. We learn about a man named Dan Cody. He is very important. He basically kind of leaves some money with Gatsby, but we also learn that the rumors were true about Gatsby and his bootlicking. Okay, that's how he started off his business. Weeks pass since Nick has seen Daisy or Gatsby. Tom and Daisy go to one of Gatsby's parties eventually. Tom tells Daisy that Gatsby gets his money from bootlegging. Now, obviously, this shows dramatic irony, because in this chapter, we as the readers know the truth about Gatsby, except other characters do not know what is going on, and they do not know the things that are revealed about this character yet. So we find out, but they do not know. Now Tom becomes curious about Gatsby and who he really is. Gatsby's real name is Jay Gatsby. We learned that. We learned about Dan Cody, the man that Gatsby has worked with. We find out Nick finds, who does Nick find at Gatsby's house? You know, he eventually finds Tom and Daisy at one point. And then does Tom know about Gatsby and Daisy's love story? Do you guys think Tom knows or is getting hints about Daisy and Gatsby? And I feel like he does, because, I mean, he's getting, you know, suspicious. Why do you think Tom hates Gatsby? Okay, for one, he has new money. Okay, it's Gatsby. He has, you know, I think he's jealous because of his grand parties that Gatsby has. And then Gatsby tells Nick about Daisy. So Nick finds out how they met, their story, and then we also, you know, we eventually find out how Daisy, you know, on her wedding day, she cried because she had a letter from Gatsby. Yeah, she still chose Tom, so keep that in mind. She still chose to marry Tom. Now, in another article, it is The Race and Thickening of Mediation and Repetitions of the Great Gatsby by Rangwala S. Here, there's a love story to sell American capitalist fantasies. It is stated in there. So basically, it is the love story between Gatsby and Daisy. It's just a profit to give people false hope of the American dream. Do you guys think this is true? If you think about it, Gatsby and Daisy, you know, Gatsby, he didn't really work as hard for his money, but he was unprivileged and, you know, he sought the American dream, or he's earned it, as one likes to say. So, you know, did he really live his American dream? Daisy, you know, is perfect, beautiful, housewife, married, rich, you know, are they characters of the American dream? You know, you guys have to think about that for later when we start writing your essays. Now, as we read in chapter 7, still suspicious, he slowed down. As we can see, he slows down when he's driving to make sure that, you know, Daisy and Gatsby didn't like run off anywhere. You know, and Tom starts mocking Gatsby as they get to a hotel to cool off in the city. Tom accuses Gatsby of lying about going to Oxford, and Gatsby reveals that he really didn't go to Oxford. What a shock. He said at the beginning he went to Oxford. He was an Oxford man. I hear you're an Oxford man. We heard that throughout the chapter. And he eventually reveals that he only went there for like a month or so, or wasn't really, so he never really went to Oxford or like, you know, graduated from there. So Tom then asked Gatsby about his intentions with Daisy. Tom tells Gatsby that Daisy would never leave him. They start an argument where Gatsby basically admits that he loves Daisy and that Daisy will leave him because she loves him. And Gatsby goes to Daisy and he says, tell them. But Daisy, you know, she starts crying. She doesn't really say anything. So Tom then sends Daisy home with Gatsby, trying to prove to him that she won't leave. Like, you guys can leave in this car, but she's never gonna leave you because we have history. Now Nick goes home and finds Gatsby hiding in the bushes, waiting for Daisy. And she needs help. Nick tells Tom, he tells Gatsby, you know, you should, you know, go, but Gatsby refuses. Nick eventually, he peeks through the window and he sees Tom and Daisy having a conversation and eating as if nothing, you know, happened. Now, in this, as we have discussed, remember under the eyes of Dr. Eckelberg, Nick perceives that Tom and Wilson are in the same position. What does he mean? Okay, you know, basically that Tom ended up having, you know, he's been I guess you would say, cheated on, and Wilson has been cheated on, but there's more to it. So what does he mean? And what does Gatsby tell Tom about Daisy? He tells him something, that she's in love with him. As we said, what does Nick realize during the heated argument? He realizes something. Something happens on the way home. Okay, somebody died. Who is the victim? It is Wilson's wife, Myrtle, which is also Tom's mistress. So that is very important to know. As we read chapter 8, Gatsby remained outside waiting for Daisy, but she never came out. And then Nick and Gatsby eat breakfast, after the next day. Nick realizes he will be later, but turns around and says, he tells Gatsby this, and he felt good about saying it. He said, "They're a rotten crowd. You're worth the whole damn bunch put together." And, he felt good about saying that. Why do you think this is the case? And do you think it was a good thing he said this? Jordan calls Nick, and their relationship takes a toll, and they both end the relationship. We don't know who ended it first. But, it's interesting how we don't really see much of Jordan and Nick's relationship. It's kind of like just put in there that they were dating, and we didn't really get to see a whole lot of them because it was mainly about Gatsby and Daisy that we're seeing. And as we continue, Wilson talks to Mike Lees as he is trying to comfort Wilson after the death of his wife. Wilson tells Mike Lees that he believes his wife saw her lover and was out to see him, and he told her God knows about her sins. The next day, Wilson sees Dr. T.J. Ecclesburg's eyes as God decides to seek revenge. As I mentioned before at the beginning, this person show up, but they didn't. It's Daisy, of course. Did not show up to Gatsby's funeral. And do you think that was a good thing? And do you think, she should have? She had a duty or obligation to go to Gatsby's funeral. Do you think that was the case? Now later, in October, summer has ended. Nick sees Tom, and he asks him about what he told Mr. Wolfsheim, or what he told Wilson that night. And so, we learn, of course, in this chapter, as our discussion questions, Mr. Gates, Gatsby's father, Nick writes a letter, to Wolfsheim. He doesn't show up to the funeral. He was surprised to see the guy with the spectator glasses, who was also like the guy on the billboard, Dr. Ecclesburg's eyes. They showed up at the Gatsby's funeral, and so Tom, what did he tell Wilson? We know that he revealed that he said Gatsby is the man who killed Myrtle. Gatsby was always reaching for the green light at the end of the dock, and we mentioned this in the last paragraphs. It's also mentioned in the novel. So what does this green light mean? Okay, there's multiple things that it can mean. Now, in an article, they talk about the green light. It's in the article American Dreaming the Great Gatsby by William Kane. Now, green can mean life, energy, happiness, joyness, but it can also symbolize money, greediness, so it can go both sides. And the green light, in this case, symbolizes both for Gatsby in the novel. If you realize it, he was reaching for, at the beginning, reaching for the light, reaching for Daisy, reaching for hope, okay? But he was also, as we mentioned, overall for the American Dream, he was reaching for money. He was greedy. So was Tom. So was, kind of Nick at some points. So the green light, symbolizes both for Gatsby, in my opinion. So we have that mentioned in there. Now we have, in another article, it is Impossible Dream, the Great Gatsby, Bodge Dreams and the Colonial Differences by Lorna Perez. Mentions in the last paragraphs, as I've said, in The Great Gatsby, it ties the relationship between Gatsby and Daisy and Gatsby's goal of living the American dream, as I mentioned. Now, do you think Gatsby got his goal of his American dream? Now, I want you guys to keep this in mind, of the American dream, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the novel, because we're going to write, essay with the American dream, whether you thought Gatsby achieved it or not, and explain your reasoning, and I will give you guys 2 days to do so. So yeah, just think about that question. Do you think he got his American dream? Yes or no? And hopefully you guys enjoyed this novel, and we had, our questions to discuss, and I think it was great. I hope you guys give you guys a little survey to take if you guys liked it or not. And yeah, that ends it for the day. Thank you. That he said Gatsby is the man who killed Meryl. Gatsby was always reaching for the green light at the end of the dock, and we mentioned this in the last paragraphs. It's also mentioned in the novel. So what does this green light mean? Okay, there's multiple things that it can mean. Now, in an article, they talk about the green light. It's in the article American Dreaming, The Great Gatsby by William Kane. Now, green can mean life, energy, happiness, joyness, but it can also symbolize money, greediness, so it can go both sides. And the green light, in this case, symbolizes both for Gatsby in the novel. If you realize it, he was reaching for, at the beginning, reaching for the light, reaching for Daisy, reaching for hope, okay? But he was also, as we mentioned, overall for the American dream, he was reaching for money. He was greedy. So was Tom. So was, kind of Nick at some points. So the green light, symbolizes both for Gatsby, in my opinion. So we have that mentioned in there. Now we have, in another article, it is Impossible Dream, The Great Gatsby, Bodge Dreams and the Colonial Differences by Lorna Perez. Mentions in the last paragraphs, as I've said, in The Great Gatsby, it ties the relationship between Gatsby and Daisy and Gatsby's goal of living the American dream, as I mentioned. Now, do you think Gatsby got his goal of his American dream? Now, I want you guys to keep this in mind, of the American dream, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the novel, because we're going to write, essay with the American dream, whether you thought Gatsby achieved it or not, and explain your reasoning, and I will give you guys 2 days to do so. So yeah, just think about that question. Do you think he got his American dream? Yes or no? And hopefully you guys enjoyed this novel, and we had, our questions to discuss, and I think it was great. I hope you guys give you guys a little survey to take if you guys liked it or not. And yeah, that ends it for the day. Thank you.